Here are two steps today. I'm going to share with you two steps today. These two steps now have helped me overcome my fears, progress in life, and how I wish I knew this when I was growing up. How I wish I had access to these books, these languages, these tutors. How I wish I'd known this earlier. So the first thing, this I'm practically speaking to people who um, but this is not secret. This is not secret. This is has been known for years by those who are from a well-to-do family, highly educated, the top 5% in the world. They've always used this. And when I carry on um, these pages, you would understand the reason why I'm saying to you, this has always been used by the very successful people. And number one is, regardless of where you are, regardless of what you're doing, the first thing you should do once you get into a place of, you could make your own choice. And the thing is, like, some of these things, our parents have made this decision for us, our environments have made this decision for us. So we just, um, we just basically, we just follow what's there. Our environment influences us, people around us influences us. We never had a time to choose. And how could we? Some of us grew up like in abject poverty where like the first thing, the most important thing was to eat, to feed the family. So talking about improving your knowledge, you know, changing your circumstance, leaving the environment behind, that's far-fetched. That's never even comes to your mind. So how would you know that? I'm saying today with the use of technology, it's a lot easier to read books. Books have become cheaper. There's so many authors there, so many people out there to help you. I'm saying this. If you're starting afresh, just like when I started, I grew up in abject poverty. You know, I remember at the age of 8, I had to get a job, just to, pay my way through school. Dad lost his job. Mom was the mom was like the only, like, breadwinner, surviving the family with her petty trade. So, I had to get a job at the age of 8. Everyone had to get a job just to, pull their weight. you know so I'm saying to you, if at the age of 8 I knew this, instead of getting a job, I would have invested in my future. I would have invested in my future, and for everything I made, everything I earned while I was 8, it could never be multiplied to what I would have earned if I followed these steps. So number one is study of language. That is key. Whatever you are doing, study your language. Now, for me, I'm an English speaking person. So I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and English is the predominant um, language of, formal language. We have about 250 languages of different tribes, but in schools, English are taught. But the thing is, like, if you went to a public school like I went to, you're not taught proper English. I mean, a lot of people came out of high school just like me, able they hardly are able to write a sentence or put two words together, and then these people went into university. So if you like went to the kind of secondary school I went to, government, man, you on your own. It's up to you to focus and set yourself a goal. So I'm saying to you, or to a parent who are growing up like in a poor area, they want a better future for their kid. I'm saying study of language. That's number one. Ensure your kids learns the proper language, not just like a pidgin English or broken English. No, the proper language. If you're going to invest in anything, invest in language. If you're English speaking, English is spoken like second to Spanish. English is like the most, or Chinese, most spoken language in the world. If you're French speaking, study French. Proper French. Have a good understanding of French. How to use sentences, phrase, nouns, verbs, everything. Study the language because language is key. And I will make you understand this later because language is key. If you can use your language properly, doors would be able to open onto you. You would open doors. just by the use of your language. Now, other thing comes after that, interest in area like what you're interested in. But if you could express yourself, if you have an idea is one thing, but being able to express your idea so others could follow you is another thing. There's a lot of great leaders there who no one would follow them. Why? Because they have the inability to express themselves. If you have a message and you can't deliver this message, you're as good as not having a message, because when you say something no one understands you, you're as good as just not saying it, keeping your mouth shut. And that's happened a lot. And by me moving around, I've tend to see a lot of people who have great ideas, but they're so scared to speak. Why? They feel intimidated, they feel inferior, they can't express themselves fully based on where they are. So I'm saying the number one thing is study your language. Study, if it's English, study your language. Really study your language. Go outside your way. Take extra lessons, extra classes. If you have to get a tutor, get a tutor. But study your language. Become the best you can in expressing yourself. I say how successful you become is attached to how you use your language. The degree of a person's ignorance would determine the person's place in the world. So by having all these ideas and not being able to express it is as good as being ignorant. And this is the thing, every person is born ignorant, but some go on to acquire knowledge to grow, and while others just stagnate. They get influenced by the environment, by the neighborhood, and sometimes it's not your fault, but there gets a stage where you cannot make any excuses. You cannot make any excuses. Anyone who remains ignorant has him or herself to blame. Now you might say this is harsh, because like when I was growing up in my environment, language, speaking to English, in fact, if you spoke English, people laughed at you. They called you Oyibo, big grammar. That's the thing. In fact, when you spoke English, people laughed at you because people had no regard for that. People focused on what they could get now. So no one was trying to become something. No, people focused on what they could get now. So it was, how do you start earning immediately? That was the most important thing. But people never put any emphasis on the future. So but if you focused on working on your English and your language, you are putting emphasis on the future. So when it counts, that's when you come to play. I'm sure you have one of those school kids who they reached their peak in high school. They're the biggest in high school. They made money, all the girls and all that, and that was it. And after school, they just declined. That was it, nothing. When the kids in the corner who they bullied started growing, becoming an IT whiz or whatever, they just stagnated. Why? Because they have nothing to fall into. Whereas the kid is going to build on something. So while I'm not trying to make excuses for my upbringing, I'm saying whoever remains ignorant has him or herself to blame. Because they get to a stage where your parents start being the motivation for you. Parents start pushing you. Your parents start forcing you to learn, to go to school. Now you have to take it upon yourself to grow, upon yourself to learn, upon yourself to become something. But when you refuse to do this, that is all on you. They said an ignorant person starts at the bottom of the pile, but to climb up the ladder, you need tools, knowledge. Take for example, to climb a mountain, you need tools. You need a harness, you need shoes, ropes, all sorts of gears. Imagine trying to climb a mountain, bare-handed, no tools. I mean, some people do it. They called solos and all that. But you can see how many of those guys die trying to climb a mountain without. And even those guys who do it, they have repeated experience over time. So therefore, they have the necessary skill to climb a mountain. And still, there's a high percentage of those guys die who are trying to climb a mountain with no harness, no ropes, no shoes. So imagine you're trying to climb the ladder of success without no tool. It's like you've already failed before you started. So an ignorant person starts at the bottom, but stagnates there, remains at the bottom of the mountain. Why? Because they have no tools to climb. So I'm saying to you, work on your language, build on your language of expression. English, if it's English, work on it, become the best. If it's French, work on it. If it's Chinese, whatever language you are going to, it that is your predominant language, or for a country you aspire to be in, focus on that language, work on that language. Because when you can express yourself clearly to people, people are going to follow you. There's a saying that says, if you can express your idea to a 6 years old kid, and that 6 years old kid could understand your idea clearly and then express it or explain it to another 6 years old kid, and that other 6 years old kid gets it, then you're top of the world. That means you can speak clearly and precisely, and everything you're trying to do, you would be understanding. And that's how important language is. Language is not just for yourself, language is expression, making other people see who you really are. So without these skills, you can't get off the ground. The base of the mountain, you remain there. The higher you climb, the smaller the mountain becomes. The fewer people get there. That's it. Because the higher you climb, the higher you go in life, the fewer people you get there. And because there's less people with all the skills necessary to climb, the base of the mountain is always overcrowded, overpopulated. You always say this, for instance, like when you attend a tennis tournament, on the first day, the locker room, the tennis court, there's multitude of people. Everyone is hitting the ball, smacking the ball. There's people going and coming. Everywhere is overcrowded. And when you go into week 2, if it's a Grand Slam, or when you go into the third, fourth day of the tournament, everywhere becomes quiet. Because only the very few, those with the best skill, those that could make it that far, remains. It's quiet, it's silent. The locker room is like a ghost town. And that's what life is. The higher you climb, the smaller it becomes. Why? Because the amount of skill necessary to climb that high is very rare. And not a lot of people know this. But the successful people have been using this for ages. That's why you see a successful man is all through down his generation to become successful. Why? Because he's learned the skill and he's passing it down to them. They learn how to read before the age of 6, 7, 8. I might teach few kids tennis these days, and from the really wealthy background, at the age of 6, you can see how they express themselves. Why? Because their parents are very successful and they know what success is about. Success becomes like an experience. It's a rope. You know the route. It's like going to where you've been before. You don't need a sat nav. It becomes natural. So that's what success is. That's what learning your language is. Not everyone can make it to the apex of the mountain, but with determination, you should. The thing about climbing a mountain is like you might not know this, we actually determine where we're going to live on that mountain, between the bottom and the apex. We actually make that decision before we start our ascent or our descent. We choose where we're going to, stop and where we're going to live based on our skills. So when you acquire the skills, they like they say, there's no mountain can stop you. You can move mountain. Why? You have the necessary skills, the necessary tools. You can climb that mountain up and down multiple times. You can live on the apex of the mountain. Why? You have the skill. And you know what happens when you live on the apex of the mountain? The view there is amazing. It's like when you have your office on the 23rd floor. It's an amazing view. There's few people there. Why? Because the bottom is always overcrowded, and then the best gets to the top and enjoy the sight. This is not luck. This is not fortune. This is process, understanding, putting in all the puzzles and making it work. And the thing with learning your language is you're not in competition with anyone. You're not in competition with anyone. You're only in competition against the mountain. You don't want to settle anywhere but the top or closer to the top. The peak, that is where you want to live. So you You want to live your best life way at the top. So that's the thing about studying your skill, studying your language, becoming the best in your field. Is like you're totally not in competition. In fact, you're more in cooperation because you understand what it is to build a team, what it is to assist people, what it is to get the best, how it is to motivate people, because now you could get across to them easily, and then they can see your dream. You could sell your dream to them in the best way. People follow leaders they trust, they understand, they could easily interpret. This is what studying your language and becoming the best you can means. That's true. The higher you climb, the better the views. Less overcrowded. Fresh air. You see that when people climb on top of the mountain, once they get there, they lift their hands and they breathe in because the air there is so clean, so fresh, uncorrupted. That's what we should aim for. And how do we start that? We start that through that process of learning our language, learning how to express ourselves, learning how to get across ideas, learning how to work with others, learning how to cooperate. And the great thing about learning your language, learning the skill, is when you learn how to climb a mountain, when you learn how to live at the top of the mountain, you can now reach down and help another person. 50 Cent calls this the homeboy syndrome. You can now reach down in your community and bring people who are like you along. Let them come and see what the successful has been doing, and that's what they do. The successful person reaches there. It's easy to bring his kids along, his family along. Why can't this be? 50 Cent calls this the homeboy syndrome. When he you remember when 50 Cent bought Mike Tyson's house in Massachusetts or somewhere like that, then he got all the boys in there, Lloyd's Bank, Tony Yayo, everyone. It was like a hotel, and people like, why would 50 Cent do that? That's because he wanted to move out of the ghetto, but he wanted the ghetto to be with him. So how best could he do this? He took the boys with him. So he was living, in a different city, but he felt he was back home. So that homeboy syndrome, you could make that work by learning how to climb the ropes and bring people along with you. Teach people, give them the tools, the skills. The more you know, the more you contribute. The higher you go, the higher you can reach others, the more others aspire to be like you. So where you begin does not matter at all. There's no excuses for where you began. The thing is, are you willing to make the sacrifice? Are you willing to learn? Are you willing to acquire? And now you might ask me, I grew up in a neighborhood, there's no books, nothing, no one, everyone here is jobless or pregnant or whatever. Where do I go to acquire these books? Where do I start to learn about languages? I tell you, study of a language is two things. The study of your language, your ability to use your language, will determine your place in society, period. The social pyramid, this would also control the amount of wealth you will acquire during your lifetime. I mean, there's some exceptions, but on a higher proportion, the ability to use your language will determine your place in society. That's how important this is. They said 85% of the people's wealth comes from the use of your language. Determine on how good your tools or your skills are will determine how high you climb on the mountain. And the thing about mountain is just like life. You can, fall back down at the bottom of the mountain, but because you have the skill, you can start all over again. So is it that you fall and die, or you start all over again? But the thing is, like, you have the skill, just like a mountain climber, climbing and their rope breaks or their harness breaks, they fall into like a position halfway out to the bottom, but they're able to start again. Why? Because they have the right tool in place, so they're not falling to the depth. So this happens in life. You probably will fall, but because you've acquired this knowledge, this skill, you are able to start all over again and make it to the top of the mountain. Why? Because you have learned the ropes. The thing about language is that a person can dress in the best attire, the latest fashion, the best car, the best house, but as soon as they open their mouth and they begin to speak, he or she proclaims his or her level on the pyramid, level in the class. So you could have all these fancy things, post all different things on social media, but the minute you begin to speak, you proclaim your level, you proclaim your class. Is it that people get drawn to you or people pull away from you? This is how easy it is, how simple it is. They say people shouldn't judge, but people make this, that is just the one thing that goes. The minute you start to speak, people know if they should pull closer to you or they should pull away from you. And that is just one thing, how you use your language. So this is unfair, I know this is unfair, but this is how the world is. You may say the most popular language in your country is not your language. English is not your first language, yes, but if we're willing to compete, if we're willing to get to the top of the pyramid, live on with the top echelon, we have to learn what is popular out there. Even if it's not your first language, I know, I'm sorry, but such is life. If you want it as bad as air, I remember when like a student came to the philosopher and said he wanted knowledge, and then the philosopher like dipped his head under the river for so long, and then the student cried out, I want air, I want air. The philosopher says, now if you want knowledge as much as you want air, you would have it. So if you want to climb the ladder of success as much as you want air, then you would find a way. You would look for a way. There's thousands of books online. There's thousands of books in the garage. I see like a pound, 500 naira. There's resources you could learn. You don't need anyone to push you. You could start learning. And the thing about learning is like once you invest in it, then you want to know more. If you want it as bad as air, you will find it. You work for it and you will become it. Because when you become, it's what you become that attracts. So when you open your mind, people will run away from you. Why? Because you haven't become. You look focusing on trying to grab what you can get and go. But when you focus on becoming something, your focus is to become the best you can, because what you become attracts. It's like when you pray, sometimes you don't get what you pray for, but you get what you are, because that's what you are is in you. But God knows best. You pray for A, He gives you B, because He knows that B will fulfill you better, or you would touch more lives with the B. But the thing is, you become. The moment you start to invest yourself, you will become. The moment you start to use your language, to walk in your language, to express yourself as best as you can. There is countless books out there. If you don't know, click on my link, send me a message. I will give you resources to help you start. Like I started the same way, by always failing and multiple times, and I said, no, I have to make a change. But I was lucky to be around people who like read books. But you might not be around those people. That's why I'm putting this out there to let you know there is another way. There is another way for you to live successfully, not to live a life of crime. No, to live successfully, happy, and being able to impact, being able to pass down. Because you could live a life of crime, but do you want to pass down crime to your kids? No. You want to have knowledge that you could pass down to generation after generation, to make a name. To make a name. They say the best legacy a man could leave is what is given to the world. No one is taken from the world. Everyone gets celebrated for what they've given. Mandela for freedom. Martin Luther King for freedom. Thomas Edison for invention. Bill Gates for charity. People get celebrated for what they've given to the world, not what they've taken from the world. So I'm saying to you, if you're thinking about being able to leave something behind someday for your kids, for the world, you have to study. You have to read. You have to work on your language. This is a gold mine. And I tell you, many people leave the comfort of their home. Don't say language is not your first language. The most popular language, or English, is not your first language. No. Many people leave the comfort of their home country and parents behind to pursue a talent. As a teenager, I remember leaving my country and traveling to different countries to go and learn tennis. And a lot of kids leave their country in different parts of the world and travel to Europe and America to go and learn tennis. Kei Nishikori, the Japanese tennis sensation, left Japan in his teens to move to America in California to Nick Bollettieri to go and learn how to play tennis. So many people do this. So if you want it as bad enough, if you want it as bad as you want air, and you're willing to invest the time, you will become. You will become. I'll give you a good example of what language is. I'm sure you've watched the movie My Fair Lady. So a good example of this is in the book by Charles Play Pygmalion, which was later adapted into the play My Fair Lady. And it says, our use of the language is one thing we cannot hide. Our use of the language is one thing we cannot hide. You can hide every other thing, you could disguise, but the minute you open your mouth, the minute you begin to speak, you practically, place yourself in your class. Another word by Blake Clark. Word can work wonders for you. Words can work wonders for you. This is how amazing the study of language is. Words can work wonders for you if you have a good understanding of how to use multiple meaning for the same word, for different words. Learning 10 new words a week. If you can do this, in Blake Clark's word can work wonders. He wrote in it that knowledge of the exact meaning of word to a large number of words accompanied a large number of success. So those who have a good meaning, a good understanding of exact meaning of word to a large number of words, accompanying how successful those people became in life. That's what I'm saying to you. Use of the language is key. Use of your language is key. And these things are free these days. There's a lot of dictionaries out there. There's a lot of dictionaries. There's different things you could pick up for free to improve on your language. Word can work wonders for you. I'll show you another example. That a study was done on a group of people on the importance of vocabulary. The test was given to executives and supervisors. The test shows that everyone in the management position had a better vocabulary than those below. So now I'll give an example. They said the maximum points was 272 points. So presidents and vice presidents had an average of 236. Managers had an average of 168. Supervisors 140. Foreman 114. Floor bosses 86. So you see, just by the standard of everyone's vocabulary, place them exactly where they are. So in eventually every case, vocabulary converted with positions and income. Every case. Children with the best vocabulary get the best grade in school. You know this already. You see them in class, you call them English, that's it. They're able to express themselves. And I found this when I eventually found myself in university. Learning how to use the English word vocabulary. So the kids with the best grades that came from the best schools, they got the best grades. Why? Because they have a better understanding of the language, the use of the language, how to express themselves. And these kids probably went on to work for the bigger companies. Why? Because when you understand the word, you know how to sell yourself. Life is about marketing. Who is willing to buy what you are willing to sell? Every one of us in this life, we are salesmen. We're all trying to sell idea to a wife or partner, a business. We're trying to sell something. So your use of the language would place you where you ought to be in life. A salesman who has improved on their vocabulary increases their sale and their position in life. The thing is, when you master one word, you improve on other words too. Deliberately learning 10 new words will pick up 90% without realizing it. Can you imagine that? Just by deliberately learning 10 new words, 10, we pick up 90% without realizing it. Many people are being held back in life just because of the language. They are so very hardworking. They have all the skills, all the enthusiasm, all the power, all the knowledge, but they're so scared to open their mouth. I realized this when I was reading 50 Cent's How to Hustle, and he had a buddy of his when they went into board meetings. This buddy had all the knowledge, all the skills, everything, but he was afraid to express himself to the CEOs. He had every knowledge, understanding of the business, but he was so scared. Why? Because his use of the language. He was frightened. He was terrified. And 51 tends to say this body is still in the same position he is today. He's been in that position for the past 20 years. Why? He has all these ideas, and why are people not buying into him? Because he's unable to express himself clearly. He's unable to sell his idea. Life is about sales. We are all salesmen on this planet. For our time here, we're here to sell ideas, sell to a new wife, sell to a new partner, sell to a new business. We are salesmen. So if you go around life not being able to sell in every field you are, then you've been held back. If you have ideas but you can't express it clearly, when people don't understand you, what happened? They move on. You should do this yourself when you listen to music. The first 3 seconds average. The humans average listening attention span is like 5 seconds. You move them. 2 seconds, you move them. 3 seconds, you move them. So imagine, you're trying to chat up someone. They give you 2-3 seconds. They move them. Why? The expression of the language, the use of your language is key. People attach knowledge. That's it. People attach knowledge to language or the use of language. They believe it is impossible for one to be larger than the other. They believe your knowledge and language goes hand in hand. They say it is impossible for the one to be larger than the others. So when you express yourself clearly and precisely, people run to you. That's why I see some people who are doing horrible things like fraudsters and whatever. You think, how are they succeeding? That's because they've learned how to use the language properly. They learn how to express themselves. So even though they're doing the wrong thing, they're succeeding in doing the wrong thing. It might be for like a short period before they get caught, but they've learned how to use the language, how to express themselves properly. And why the person doing all the right thing is stuck in one place. Why? Because they're not able to express themselves freely, clearly, precisely. And this is what I'm saying to you. People attach language and knowledge together. They believe they go together. One could not be bigger than the other. And that's what you should know. So finally, I would say, learn how to use the language to construct a sentence. The importance of speech. Find your 15 minutes to read a day. Just 15 minutes to read a day. Yeah, just 15 minutes to read a day. Just use that. You might increase this as the day goes by, but start with 15 minutes. Read. This means, just let me tell you what 15 minutes means a day. Reading for 15 minutes a day means you will read half a book a week, 2 books in a month, 20 books a year, and 1,000 reading in a lifetime. Imagine that. 1,000 reading in a lifetime by just reading 15 minutes a day. And when you start to read, start to grow interest, you're more likely to increase this. And can you imagine reading 1,000 books in a lifetime? And I'll tell you this, for example, coming from where I came from, poor, object of poverty, never been able to read till I probably would start reading in university, because high school didn't really count. I just did what I had to do. So when I went into the job market, I realized I was 10 years behind and 1,000 books behind. 10 years behind and 1,000 books behind in my first year of university. This is what I realized. So imagine if you could start now trying to read 15 minutes a day. Imagine what happens when you get to a stage where you're going to university, a new work career, a new country, a new place. This is an easy way to become well read. When you hear people, they say this is well read. That's how they started. 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day. That is how they started. And people now say to them, these are well read. Just 15 minutes a day. That is the basics. If you can be on your laptop, whatever, scrolling up and down for hours and hours a day. I have a friend who, like, she gets like social media anxiety. She would delete her social medias, and after a month she go back there. She can't get enough. She can't turn it off, and then she can't keep it. She's just like in and out. So if you could invest that time in just reading 15 minutes a day, something that's helping you, it's not giving you anxiety, it's not showing you someone's fake life somewhere, it's not putting you against any competition, it's just trying to make you grow. You're building for your future. You're focusing on doing today. You're giving today 100% by investing 15 minutes in yourself. And they say, when you do the best you can today, you have nothing to worry about. So, as I say, if you don't know where to find books, you don't know what books to read, you don't know where to start, please contact me. I will give you easy books to start with, where to read, how to start, how to help yourself. Because you don't want to live on the bottom of the pile. It's too crowded. You want to be on top of the mountain where the mountain is fresh air. And I'm not going to speak too much about this, but after you've mastered your language, then number 2 thing, you must now grow in your area of interest. This area of interest, reading in this area is for profit. Studying in this area is to help you become well. This area would help you achieve your goal. Now, this area are the ideas you're trying to get that you can now share, because now you already know how to express yourself. So now you're not investing in how you're going to become what you want to become, because you now already know how to share these ideas. So number 1, study your language. Number 2, work on your area of interest. This area of interest, these are the ideas that will help you become. And don't be like those who say, oh, I want to become this. I sit with a few kids when I travel back home. They're like, I want to travel, I want to play tennis, I want to read books. And I ask them, what have you done in this area? Nothing. They've not invested even 10 minutes to go and research that area. One book. Don't be like those. I see many people, they say that I want to do this, I want to do something, I want to do that. They don't even have one book in that field. How do you learn from people's experience without learning about your history, about your country, about yourself? How do you do that? By reading books. Books shares with us history, recipe for the human successes and failures, and therefore we can learn from this without making that same without making those same mistakes ourselves. Book extends a narrow presence into the limitless past, into the limitless future. Book shows us the mistake men and women have done before us. For one not to read is like closing one's eyes while walking in total darkness. Through life, it's just like walking around your life in total darkness. Why? With your eyes closed. That's when you refuse to read. That's what you're doing. Eyes closed. So by reading, you are making up your mind to open your eyes, see the world, grow up with it, prosper with the world. and don't fall by the wayside. Grow with the word. It's not just because reading or opening our eyes helps us achieve a goal. No, but because it is the best way to live. To have imagination. When you see, you can imagine, you can dream, you can enjoy. You're able to enjoy. No, you're able to enjoy your best moments by being able to experience. Don't you see that when you travel, you take on new experiences, new places? Imagine traveling around the world with your eyes closed, not seeing anything, not being able to imagine what the faces of people will be, the faces of places will be. So when you stop to read, when you refuse to read, both your language, both the study of your language and your area of interest, this is what you're doing. You're walking around life with no imagination. You're living in total darkness. I know this for sure. I grew up in an area where no one actually read. It was like no one had the time to read. People just focused on what they would eat for the day. So when you grow up around this world, it's easy to become part of the environment. Like they say, you have become the product of your environment. Without actually realizing it, your environment influences you. Everything you do is taken from a page or sheet of your environment. And you never realize that between where you are and where you want to get to is just few sheets of papers, pages of a book that's keeping you where you are today, that's stopping you from getting to where you ought to be. Just few pages, just few slides, just 15 minutes a day. Can you imagine that? Like in 10 years' time, someone says to you, do you know that it's just because you never invested 15 minutes a day that you are where you are today? In a day, we'll have 24 hours. 8 hours we're sleeping, another 8 hours working for someone. Then we'll have the last 8 hours. What do you do with that 8 hours? And even the 8 hours working for someone, we have breaks. Sometimes we only function like 40%. So imagine, in your 60s and someone says to you, you are where you are today. You are where you are today because you refuse to invest. You refuse to invest just 15 minutes a day on yourself. Can you imagine that?